Hi, I'm Leon. And my parents used to say the burn on my face made people uncomfortable, like I should apologize for surviving. They said it with a smile, behind closed doors, in gift boxes wrapped like love. I was cropped out of photos, left off wedding invites, told I was too much for family events. Then a veteran recognized the scar, not as something shameful, but sacred. That's when everything cracked open. Why did it take a stranger to see what my family spent years hiding? And what else were they hoping I'd never remember? I woke up to the smell of my neighbor's bacon seeping through the paper-thin wall of my apartment. The scent reminded me of a time when someone else cooked breakfast for me. That hadn't happened in years. The light slanting through the blinds painted stripes across the chipped countertop, and the clock blinked 7:14 a.m. Another birthday, 35 years old. I poured myself a cup of yesterday's coffee and stood in silence until I noticed the small box by the door. It was wrapped in pale pink, too carefully for something casual. I didn't need to check the handwriting. Only one person still bothered with cursive on birthday wrapping: my mother. I stared at it for a while before picking it up. It felt heavier than it looked. It's always the small boxes, I whispered to no one, that carry the heaviest weight. I opened it slowly, like peeling off a bandage. Inside was a sleek white tube, scar removal cream, the expensive kind. There was a note neatly tucked inside. Use twice a day. By Thanksgiving, you'll look normal in pictures again. Normal? I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I just set it on the table and let the silence stretch. This wasn't a surprise. It was a tradition now. Every year, some form of fix yourself disguised as a gift. The phone rang 5 minutes later, right on schedule. Did it arrive? My mother asked. Her voice was all surface sweetness, warm but polished. It did, I said flatly. You know I mean well. I know, I replied. That's the problem. She paused. I could picture her blinking, tight-lipped, probably in her pristine kitchen with lemon-scented candles and matching linen napkins. Thanksgiving's just a few months away, she added. Plenty of time. For what? To look presentable. And just like that, she moved on to asking if I'd RSVP'd to my cousin's wedding. I hung up after murmuring a non-committal answer. The cream sat there like it was watching me, like it knew something. I made myself a peanut butter sandwich and sat at the table staring at the wall. That scar, the one that slashed across my cheekbone and traced down to my jaw, wasn't from clumsiness. But that's what they told everyone. She left the stove on. I'd overheard my father saying once at a family dinner, as if I wasn't right there. She's always been careless. The truth? I had run into a burning house to save my sister's little girl. I pulled her out with smoke in my lungs and fire chewing at my skin. I was 24, no fire gear, no hesitation, just instinct. But they rewrote the story, because admitting the truth meant acknowledging me, and acknowledging me meant facing the shame of never saying thank you. Even my niece, she believed their version now. Last Christmas, she pointed at my cheek and asked, "Did you burn yourself making cookies?" I couldn't even answer. I'd tried to correct it once, years ago. I brought it up at dinner when someone praised Celine, my sister, for how she handled the fire trauma so gracefully. I said, I was the one who... Vera had cut in, sharp as a blade, whispering through her teeth, "Don't embarrass the family." So I didn't. I stopped trying. After finishing my sandwich, I grabbed my library ID and slung my bag over my shoulder. The air outside was thick and hot, the kind of Florida heat that clings. As I walked toward the bus stop, I passed families setting up for birthday parties in the park. Balloons tied to picnic tables. Laughter. A woman handing a juice box to her daughter. I kept my head down. At work, the hours moved like syrup. I shelved books, checked returns, smiled at regulars, and said, "Enjoy your day," more times than I could count. None of them knew it was my birthday. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want the cake, or the candles, or the awkward singing. I just wanted quiet. And maybe not to feel invisible. Around 6:45, as I was straightening a stack of returns, a man approached the desk. Mid-40s, ball cap low over salt and pepper hair. His shirt was plain, his shoes worn, but his eyes, they held something steady. He didn't ask for help, didn't even pretend to browse. He just looked at me. Not the way people usually look, not at the scar, not through me. At me. Then he said quietly, "You were in the fires on Blanton Street, weren't you?" My hands froze on the book cart. The room seemed to shift, like gravity rearranged itself. I hadn't heard anyone speak that name in years. "Blanton Street," he repeated. "I remember you. You held my hand until the firefighters came." His voice was soft but sure, like someone carefully unwrapping a truth they weren't sure would be welcome. "I remember you. You held my hand until the firefighters came." I hadn't heard those words in over a decade. Not in that order. Not with that clarity. My first instinct was to scan his face for familiarity, but time had done what it always does. Softened edges, added lines. Yet those eyes, something in them lit up an old corner of my mind I hadn't visited in years. "I was the guy in the back room," he said. "Blanton Street. My legs were trapped under a beam. You pulled it off me, wrapped my thigh with, I think it was a dish towel." My fingers curled slightly around the edge of the returns desk. I remembered. Not his name, not right away, but the towel, the smell of burnt insulation, the blood, and the way I had whispered to him, over and over, "You're not alone." "You were gone before I could say anything," he continued, shifting his weight. "They sedated me. I woke up 3 days later, and no one could tell me who you were." "Leanne," I finally said, my voice rougher than I intended. "Leanne Shipman." He smiled. "Miles Hargrove. I've been looking for you." After a pause that felt too long and not long enough, he nodded toward the checkout counter. "Mind if I motioned him over, still stunned, still processing. "What brought you here?" "Google," he said, offering a sheepish grin. "I saw a photo in a local event piece. Recognized the scar, same angle, same woman who knelt beside me while the world burned." I hadn't planned to cry that day, especially not in my work shirt with the faded library logo and a coffee stain on the hem. But I felt something shift, not just in me, but in the air between us. "They never let me thank you," he said, quieter now. And I think that did something to both of us. I didn't know how to respond. Not then. So I just nodded. That night, I walked home slower than usual. The sky was still holding on to its heat, like Florida wasn't ready to let the day go. My mind kept flickering back to that moment. The room, the flames, the hand I held. When I got home, I passed by the family photo still hanging in the hallway. The edited version. The one from that barbecue years ago, before the fire. We'd all posed in front of Vera's perfect hydrangeas, matching outfits, forced smiles. I'd been in the shot. I remembered the photographer asking us to scoot closer, remembered the click of the shutter. But in the final print, I wasn't there. Cropped clean. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Then I found the original on my old phone and laid them side by side. It wasn't strangers who erased me. It was my own blood. Later that evening, after I'd reheated some leftover soup and folded the laundry I forgot about yesterday, I sank onto the couch and opened my phone. A new notification. Celine had posted again. Mother's Day. The caption read, "Proud to be an only child. Mom, you've always had my back." Blessed. My thumb hovered over the comment box. I typed, erased, typed again. Half a dozen versions of, "Are you serious?" filtered through my brain. But before I hit send, another text popped up. From Vera. "Please don't comment on your sister's post. Let her have this." Let her have this. Like it was candy. Like she hadn't already taken the credit, the space, the stage. like I was the one making things difficult by existing. I deleted my draft and turned off the phone. I won't speak, but I'll remember. The next morning, I opened the library early. It was quiet, just the hum of the HVAC and the whisper of the automatic doors. When I reached the circulation desk, I noticed something unusual, a folded note left neatly beside the keyboard. Thank you again. I run a support group for burn survivors. If you ever feel like talking, M. Miles. I stared at the handwriting for a while. It was blocky, neat, deliberate. Strangers know how to see you. Family teaches you how to disappear. That evening, I went digging through my storage bin. The one under the bed with old yearbooks, expired warranties, and photos I hadn't touched in years. I found it near the bottom, the original print of that family photo, the one where I was standing slightly off-center, my hand on my niece's shoulder, half smiling in the way people do when they know they're temporary. I placed it beside the cropped version I'd found in Vera's hallway last summer. One told the truth, the other told the story they preferred. The problem with silence is that it makes space for other people's lies. It gives them room to grow roots, to settle in, get comfortable, and pass for truth. I learned that the hard way at this year's Resilience Day in Tallahassee. The library was one of the event partners, so we were asked to help set up and stick around to support community morale. I agreed because it was a work thing and because I didn't expect anything. That's the safest way to move through days like these. Expect nothing, and you'll be less likely to get blindsided. But even that rule didn't protect me when I heard Selini's name called. I was standing near the back of the tent, half listening to the host drone on about unsung heroes and community pillars, when my sister stepped up to the microphone in a navy dress and a smile she'd perfected over years of public praise. She's always tried to be a pillar for her family, the MC said, especially during hard times. There was polite applause. I didn't clap. Then Selene took the mic and said, "Family is everything, and when we went through what we did, the fire, the uncertainty, I knew I had to stay strong. For Mom. For my niece." I blinked, stunned. My niece? I looked around. No one seemed confused. Not until I heard a soft voice beside me. "Wasn't it her sister who was in the paper years ago?" A woman murmured to her friend. I didn't turn, just stared at Selene. She looked straight ahead, thanking donors and smiling as if she hadn't just stolen my name from history. I waited until the ceremony ended, then slipped away before anyone noticed me. I didn't need to hear the rest. The next week, an envelope showed up at my door. I thought maybe it was from Miles or the local community center, something harmless. But when I opened it, I saw a wedding invitation. My cousin was getting married in October. The envelope was addressed to Marla Shipman. Marla. We hadn't had a housekeeper named Marla in over a decade, but the name stuck. I texted my cousin. "You got my name wrong," I wrote. After 10 minutes, she responded, "Oh God, that's what Selene gave the list. I'll fix it." I never answered, because it's always a mistake, until you realize it's not. It's a strategy. They don't want you there as you are. They want you as something easier to explain. Or not at all. That night, I pulled out my laptop and started Googling my own name. Not in a vain way, in a desperate way. I wanted to see if my story existed anywhere outside my head. The fire happened 12 years ago. Blanton Street, a duplex, kitchen fire. I typed all the keywords, checked the archives. There were 2 small articles. One, quote, from Selene. "She held the family together through it all," it said. No mention of me. No photo, no timeline, just omission. The world never saw me. And my family liked it that way. Later that week, just before the library closed, my phone buzzed. A message from Miles. "Can I share your name on the next episode? You deserve to be known." I stared at the screen for a long time. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. Because it wasn't just a name, it was a decision. I didn't say yes right away. I needed time. Time to decide whether speaking would finally set me free or just add another weight to carry. That Saturday, I put on a dark dress and pulled my hair back tight. The funeral was for my great-uncle Alan, the only person in the family who ever called me kiddo, with warmth instead of pity. He wasn't perfect, but he never made me feel like I needed fixing. That alone made him rare. The church was a towering white-columned building with polished pews and a lobby that smelled like citrus polish and old hymnals. I arrived early, as usual. Old habit. Being early lets you avoid the crowd and the forced hellos. When I stepped inside, an usher greeted me with a pleasant smile, glanced at the clipboard, then hesitated. His eyes flicked up toward the rows up front, where gold ribbons marked off sections labeled Family. "We were asked to seat direct family in the first 6 rows," he said gently, almost apologetically. "I am direct family," I replied, voice level. "Yes, ma'am, but we've been given a list. I can seat you in row 11. I didn't argue. I walked past the rows where my name used to belong and sat near the aisle, alone. The space around me felt colder than the air conditioning. I glanced ahead. Vera and Selene were already seated. Selene with her chin tilted, Vera whispering to a friend on her left. Neither turned to acknowledge me. They don't even want me to mourn with them. They want me to mourn like I'm a guest in my own bloodline. The service began, and the words floated past me without landing. Memories came and went. Uncle Alan letting me skip church once to walk his dog, him sneaking me banana pudding before dinner. They were mine, and they didn't need Vera's approval to be valid. No one spoke to me afterward. Not Vera, not Selene, not anyone. On Monday, I was eating lunch in the library break room when my phone buzzed. Family group chat. I opened it and stared. Someone had posted a meme. My face, cropped from a photo when I still had a fuller smile, was edited into a cartoonish witch, green-tinted, with a pointy hat. The caption read, "At least she won't need a costume this year." No one laughed in the thread, but no one objected either. A few dots blinked, then stopped. 3 minutes later, Selene sent me a private message. "Don't overreact. It's just a joke. You know we love you." Love me? They barely acknowledged I existed. I wrote a full response, a long one. I called her out, laid it all out, from the fire to the photos, to the name they never said out loud anymore. It felt good for a second. Then I deleted it. Instead, I took a screenshot of the meme, renamed the file truth.cheek, and saved it in a folder on my phone labeled Keep. After closing, I stayed behind at the library to finish logging returns. My coworker Becca noticed I was quieter than usual. She poured me a lukewarm cup of break room coffee and sat across from me without asking permission. "You good?" she asked gently. I handed her the phone, let her see the meme. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Becca stared at it for a beat, then looked at me. "You don't owe them your silence. You know that, right?" "They're family," I muttered, more out of muscle memory than conviction. Politeness is not the same as peace. I laughed quietly. I've been polite so long, I forgot how to speak. That night, I lay in bed with a pen and a notebook instead of my phone. It had been years since I'd written anything that wasn't a work list or grocery plan, but when I flipped to a clean page, the words came anyway. The first time they told me to stay quiet, I did. Then, I did it again. And again. Until I became the silence they preferred. That line stayed on the page, heavy and certain. The next morning, an email landed in my inbox from the community coordinator at the library. "Hi, Leanne. We're hosting a reading night this Thursday. Local voices, small audience. You'd be perfect if you're interested. No pressure." I stared at it. My hand hovered over the mouse. Part of me wanted to play it safe. Read a classic. Something someone else had written. Something beautiful and distant. But another part, the one I'd silenced for too long, had different ideas. I clicked reply and typed just 3 words. "I'll read mine." The first line I wrote wasn't angry, it was honest. And honesty, in my family, is the worst kind of rebellion. The following Thursday, I found myself sitting in the back of a modest community center, watching a circle of strangers lean into one another's pain like it was something sacred. A group for burn survivors, hosted quietly on the second Thursday of every month. Miles had told me about it after our encounter at the library. He hadn't pushed, just left the note and the choice in my hands. I almost didn't come. But that night, I'd sat on the edge of my bed and stared at my reflection, at the scar that no amount of corrective cream had faded. And something in me whispered, "Go be seen by someone who doesn't need you to shrink to be comfortable." So here I was, not speaking, just listening. The room smelled like weak coffee and disinfectant. People shared stories about kitchens, car accidents, war zones, even fireworks gone wrong. I recognized something in every voice. Not the pain, but the silence that always followed it. Then Miles stood. He didn't look at me, not directly. Just scanned the circle and said, "There's someone here tonight who pulled me out of hell and never asked to be thanked. Leanne Shipman. She's here." My throat locked, eyes turned. Not with pity, but something harder to describe. Acknowledgment. A man nodded at me, slow and deliberate. A woman across the circle smiled. I didn't speak, but I didn't shrink either. Later that night, after the group had ended and chairs were being stacked, Miles walked by and placed a small recorder on the table near me. "I'm recording a short episode tomorrow," he said. "You don't have to be in it, but I'd like to say your name, just once, the real version of what happened." I just nodded. The next day, his podcast went live. It was called The Hands That Held Me. It was simple, just his voice, steady and measured, telling the story of a young woman who entered a burning home and wrapped a stranger's wounds with her bare hands, all while chaos unfolded around them. He said my name, clearly, twice. And then, like wildfire, the comments started. "I know her, she was my librarian." "She's the reason my brother made it out." My uncle said a woman dragged him out and vanished. He thought he imagined her. I listened to it alone, curled up on my couch, knees pulled to my chest. And when I heard my name spoken with respect, without hesitation, without revision, I felt something unclench deep inside me. But the relief was short-lived. That evening, I got a voicemail from Celine. Her tone was clipped, tight like a stretched wire. "Mom's upset. People are asking questions. Couldn't you have run this by us first?" Us. I sat with the weight of that word. How often they used it to mean, not you. I opened a new text, typed, "I didn't need your permission to tell the truth," and hit send. No apology, no caveats. Later that night, another email appeared in my inbox. A women's trauma panel, hosted by a statewide resilience conference, had heard the podcast. They wanted me to speak, not Miles. Me. The RSVP button glowed blue. I stared at it. Because I knew, if I clicked yes, I stopped being invisible. I stopped being small. I stopped being theirs to rewrite. I hovered for just a second longer. Then I clicked. I clicked yes. Not because I was brave, but because hiding had finally become unbearable. That single act felt like lighting a match in a room filled with gasoline. 2 days later, I got the call. It was late, nearly 10 p.m. I was washing a plate in the sink when my phone buzzed. Vera's name flashed on screen. I let it go to voicemail. Moments later, her voice echoed through the speaker. "This stunt is hurting our name. You've made things harder for your sister. Think about the family for once." Stunt. As if speaking the truth required choreography. I hadn't even pressed stop before another buzz came through. This time a text from Celine. "I've been asked to step down from a board. People are Googling your name. Please fix this." Fix this. It was always the same demand, dressed in different language. Hide. Minimize. Be small enough that they could pretend I didn't cast a shadow. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering, then typed, They only notice me when their reputations get bruised. I didn't send it. Not yet. I just let the screen go dark. The next morning, I received an email from a local filmmaker. He was doing a short documentary series on resilience and survival stories in the community. He'd heard my name on the podcast and wanted to speak. I agreed to a short pre-interview at the library after hours. He was polite, professional, and very curious. But somewhere between setup and sound check, he said, "Your mother reached out first. She said your sister Selene was a major emotional support during your recovery and should be included." My jaw clenched so tight I felt it in my molars. I asked him to repeat it. "She emailed our team, said Selene visited you daily at the hospital." I inhaled slowly. "No one visited me," I said evenly, "except the nurse who changed my bandages." He blinked. I saw it click. "I'd appreciate if the documentary reflected what actually happened," I added. "No rebranding." Later that week, the teaser for the project dropped online. The title was sharp and deliberate, Unburned, the story they tried to bury. It spread faster than I expected. People from town began commenting, some remembering details, others admitting they never knew the full story. There were posts from people I hadn't spoken to in years. "I remember her. She ran in when everyone else froze. My son talks about the librarian with the scar who always knew his name." I didn't know how to feel. Gratitude, yes, but also something closer to dizziness. I wasn't used to being defended. I wasn't sure what to do with that kind of kindness. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table, eating reheated stir-fry, when I heard the familiar thud of mail hitting the floor. I wiped my hands, went to collect it. Amid bills and grocery coupons was a large envelope from a law office downtown. I opened it slowly, methodically, as if peeling back another layer of who I was supposed to be. Inside, a notice of defamation proceedings, filed by Vara. The words blurred for a moment. My heart didn't race, and my hands didn't shake. I just read it again. They'd declared war. But they should have known. I'd already walked through fire. I didn't flinch. Not this time. Not when the notice from the law office arrived. Not when Vera's voicemail ended with her usual, "We're doing this for your own good." And certainly not when Celine posted another smiling photo captioned, "Family always comes first." The line was drawn, and I wasn't the one who drew it crooked. A week after the documentary teaser aired, I got a forwarded email from an old mutual friend. The subject line read, "Wedding invitation, Trent and Celine." I stared at the screen. My chest didn't tighten, my throat didn't close, but my hand clenched the mouse hard enough to ache. Trent Massey, the man I used to plan a life with. We were 23 and impossibly naive, talking about house colors and dog names. Then the fire happened, and everything changed. We drifted, I disappeared, and he reappeared beside my sister. The wedding date? October 4th, the anniversary of the fire. Not the week after, not a random fall weekend. The date, my date, branded on my skin, and now stitched onto monogrammed napkins and floral arrangements. An hour later, my phone buzzed. "Vera, we didn't think you'd want to come. It's a family affair." A family affair? I wasn't invited. I was erased, again. But this time, it felt like strategy. That night, I curled up on the couch, phone in hand, mind spinning. Then came a message from Becca at the community center. Short and urgent. "You need to see this." She sent a link to an unlisted video. I clicked play. There was Celine, backstage at a local women's panel, fixing her lipstick and talking to someone off camera. "Just don't include my sister in the intro," she said. "She's not great for optics." She didn't sound angry, just calculated. I paused the video, rewound, listened again. She didn't just forget me, she weaponized the forgetting. I sat with that thought, the weight of it pressing against every bone. The next morning, I showed the clip to Miles. "You want to go public?" he asked gently. I hesitated. "I'm not looking for revenge," I said, "but I won't be buried quietly again." Within hours, the video was posted to a local forum. then picked up by a regional account that highlighted community hypocrisy. The comments came fast. Family doesn't do this. This is image control at its ugliest. My sister did this to me too. For the first time, the public wasn't just listening. They were seeing. Selene tried to backpedal. Vera called it a misunderstanding and accused me of manufacturing drama. But the damage was already done. Their version of the story, clean, polished, perfect, had cracked. And in the shards, people were finding pieces of me. Later that week, as I was cleaning up my inbox, a new message appeared. Subject: Keynote Speaker Opportunity, Women's Advocacy Network Body. We were moved by your podcast and what you've endured. Would you consider being our keynote speaker this fall? I read it 3 times. And then, again. I stared at the glowing screen, the soft hum of my ceiling fan, the only sound in the room. Maybe the people who save you aren't the ones you're born to, but the ones who believe you. I hit reply. And for once, I wasn't afraid to speak. I hit reply. And for once, I wasn't afraid to speak. It started as a panel. Nothing grand. Folding chairs in a community center gym. Lukewarm coffee on a plastic table. The theme was Unsung Women of Survival. I was supposed to read from a short essay I'd written. Something polished and polite. Something digestible. But as I sat backstage, script in hand, I couldn't get past the feeling in my gut. That same twist I'd felt before rushing into that burning house years ago. That same ache in my chest when I watched Selene claim credit for a rescue she never made. I stood at the podium and looked out at the audience. A mix of students, parents, trauma workers, even a few retirees in their Sunday best. All eyes waiting. I didn't read my essay. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out a flash drive. I want to show you something, I said. My voice didn't shake. The screen behind me flickered. Then the footage played. Body cam video. From a firefighter who'd arrived at the scene that night. It showed me, my younger self, hauling a child out of a smoke-filled house, my arm already scorched, clothes torn, eyes wild. I cradled her, whispering something you couldn't quite hear. Then, clear as day, a child's voice cried out, "Dee Dee!" Gasps rippled across the room. Some covered their mouths, others simply stared. I let the silence sit before I spoke. That was the moment strangers saw me, I said, but my family still didn't. The applause didn't come right away. But when it did, it wasn't the polite, pat-your-back kind. It was thunderous, earned. That night, I returned home to 24 new messages. But one subject line stopped me cold. Vera Kraft files defamation suit against daughter. I clicked the article. Mother sues daughter for damaging family honor through public falsehoods. Allegations include reputation harm, intentional emotional distress. There it was. Headline and all. The fire I didn't start, reignited in court filings. A reporter called an hour later for comment. I agreed to a brief interview the next morning. No studio, just a bench outside the courthouse. The camera rolled. I looked straight at the lens. I didn't light the fire, I said. I carried someone out of it, and I won't apologize for surviving. That clip made it to the evening news. Later that day, Selene called. Her voice wasn't furious. It was shaky, cracked. "You've torn us apart," she said. "Are you happy now?" "No," I replied, "but I'm not ashamed of the truth." There was a long silence. Then the line went dead. I didn't call back. By Friday, local news was flooded with commentary. Some people defended Vera, talking about family dignity and loyalty, but most didn't. Most saw what they needed to see. The erasure, the gaslighting, the truth finally surfacing like smoke from a buried flame. That weekend, I packed a folder with every legal notice, article clipping, and a copy of the footage. Miles met me at my door before I could call him. "I figured you'd need someone to walk with," he said simply. Outside the courthouse, a small crowd had gathered. Some held signs. Some just stood silently, watching. Bearing witness. Reporters called my name. I kept walking. Miles didn't speak. He didn't have to. We reached the courthouse steps, and I paused before the heavy double doors. I took a deep breath. My heels clicked against the concrete as I turned and faced the crowd. "Let them all watch," I whispered. Then I walked inside. I wasn't just walking into court. I was walking into the version of myself they never thought I'd become. The lobby was too quiet for how many people had shown up. The buzz outside hadn't yet reached the inner hallway, but I could feel it pressing at the glass. I stood near the elevators, trying not to fidget. Miles waited down the corridor, speaking softly with a woman from the press. I needed space. Voices echoed around the corner, light, casual, out of place. Then I heard it, clear, small, and devastating. "Dee Dee's the one who saved me, not Mom. Mom says not to talk about it." It was my niece. She stood near a journalist holding a notepad. She was older now, but still had Celine's jawline in my eyes. Her voice was matter-of-fact, like she was reciting something she'd only recently realized was true. The journalist looked up, caught my eye, and paused mid-sentence. Something shifted behind his face. Like facts had just become something more. I didn't move. I didn't approach her. But I felt something settle, like a puzzle piece sliding into place. Kids don't lie. They just echo what they're told to forget. I didn't linger. I walked into the courtroom. A week earlier, I'd applied to adopt a foster girl, a 13-year-old named Kendra. Quiet, artistic, had lived in 5 homes in 6 years. I thought we'd be a good match. I thought I could offer something different. Safe. That morning, before court, the letter arrived. "Application denied," it read. "Concerns include incomplete psychological recovery and visible trauma-related disfigurement, which may affect household stability." They didn't call me unfit. They called me unfinished. I folded the letter slowly, tucked it into my purse beside my notes for court. I didn't cry, but I did sit with it, with how heavy the words felt. The courtroom was cold. The judge, a woman with graying hair pulled tight, looked at each of us carefully. Vera's lawyer launched into a speech about character assassination, legacy, and emotional harm. I let him finish. Then it was my turn. I stood slowly, spine straight. "I didn't ruin this family," I said. "I just stopped being the part you kept off camera." Gasps followed like a breeze across a still lake. I didn't add more. I didn't need to. Vera didn't look at me. Celine stared straight ahead. There was no rebuttal. After the hearing adjourned, I stepped outside into the warm afternoon light. A small crowd had formed beyond the metal barriers, some with phones raised, others just standing, watching. A woman in her 50s approached me carefully. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice was steady. "My sister's been afraid to speak too," she said. "She told me your story made her feel less crazy, like maybe she wasn't alone." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. I turned toward the courthouse steps, just in time to see Vera slip out the side exit. No cameras, no press, no scene. This time, she didn't want the spotlight, and I didn't need it. Some people leave with silence. I was ready to leave with sound. Some people leave with silence. I was ready to leave with sound. The day after the hearing, I met with Cassidy Vaughn at a small cafe off Monroe Street. She ordered black coffee and nothing else, the kind of no-nonsense approach you'd expect from someone who grew up chasing after truth through headlines. She didn't waste time. "My mother was the nurse who first treated you after the fire," she said plainly, pushing her recorder between us. "She never told me your name. Just said there was this young woman with burnt hands who refused to stop applying pressure on a firefighter's femoral artery until backup arrived. Said you whispered the whole time." I stared at her. "She said you never cried," Cassidy added. "You didn't even ask if you were okay. You just asked if the man was breathing." The weight of that landed slowly. I hadn't known her mother had survived. I hadn't even known who I was holding that night. Cassidy's article ran under the headline, The Woman Who Saved My Mother. It went viral before lunch. By dinner time, my mailbox, physical and digital, was overflowing. Letters from veterans, trauma nurses, burn survivors, teenage girls who said they never saw someone like them in a story until now. Women who said I'd made them brave. Men who admitted they'd been cowards. A pastor from Birmingham who said he was changing his Sunday sermon because of me. The next day, I received the court's final decision. Lawsuit dismissed with prejudice. The judge's statement made its way across the news. Telling one's truth in the face of erasure is not defamation. It is self-restoration. I read it 3 times. Then I exhaled. Deep, full, final. On Saturday, I stood on the same stage where I once helped set up folding chairs as a part-time library assistant. Now, I stood behind a lectern, invited to speak to an auditorium of high school juniors and seniors about trauma and resilience. Miles sat in the 3rd row, his hands folded tight, eyes never leaving mine. I told them about the fire, about the silence, about the cost of staying quiet just to keep the peace. I told them what peace wasn't. I once believed silence protected us, I said. I was wrong. It only protects the ones who hurt us. That night, after the event, I got a call from my editor. "The contract's ready," she said. "Title's solid. The scar you gave me, and how I made it sacred." Then came the question I hadn't fully considered until then. "How do you want to be listed on the cover?" I paused, looked at my hands, ran my fingers over the healed tissue, still ridged, still mine. "As myself," I said. There was a quiet on the line. "Finally," I added, "I wasn't just writing a book. I was writing the version of me they tried to erase." The morning sun slid through the blinds like a quiet visitor. I sipped lukewarm coffee and watched the inbox on my laptop fill with congratulations, interview requests, and one subject line that stopped me cold. From Celine Craft, subject. "I don't know if this helps?" I hesitated, fingers hovering over the mouse before I finally clicked. The message was short. "I don't know if I was protecting Mom or myself. I'm sorry you were alone. I don't know how to fix it." That was it. No greeting, no closing, just an admission floating in the silence she'd contributed to for years. I didn't respond. I didn't even draft a reply. I just sat with the words. Sometimes an apology isn't for closure. It's just noise after silence. 2 days later, I stood in the back of a small bookstore tucked between a dry cleaner and a thrift shop. The kind of place with uneven floors and mismatched chairs. A handwritten sign in the window read, "Local author, reading tonight, Liane Shipman." The room wasn't large, but every seat was filled. I recognized some faces. A former coworker from the library, a teenager who'd once asked me to help her write a college essay, a man from the fire survivor group. Miles sat in the far corner, arms crossed, eyes calm. My hands trembled as I stepped forward, but my voice didn't. I opened my book to a marked page and began. They mocked my burn, but I turned it into a brand of truth. For years, I tried to scrub myself back into something palatable. All it did was make the wound quieter, not smaller. A woman in the back, maybe in her 50s, wiped away a tear. She nodded once and didn't look away again. After the event, I stayed to sign a few copies. Just as I was packing up, the store owner handed me an envelope. "This came earlier today," she said. "Said it was important." It was a letter, handwritten from Iowa. "Dear Ms. Shipman," it began. "My name is Anna. My mom has a burn scar down her back. She never talked about it. Not once. After we listened to your podcast together, she told me the whole story. She was in a house fire at 17. She'd always felt ashamed. You made her feel seen. You made me see her." I folded the letter slowly, reverently, and slipped it into my purse alongside the hospital band I'd kept tucked inside for more than a decade. Maybe that's all legacy is, giving someone else permission to speak. The next morning, I drove alone to the Fire Memorial Park. It was quiet, just the sound of wind rustling the oaks and a few birds in the distance. The stone wall shimmered faintly in the morning light, etched with names of the fallen. I traced my fingers across the name of the firefighter who pulled me out. No speeches, no tears. I reached into my tote and gently placed a copy of my book at the base of the wall, spine out, facing forward. That was the thank you he never asked for. As I turned to leave, the breeze caught the edge of the cover, flipping it open to the dedication page. To those who burned and still stood. Back home that evening, I lit a candle by the window, not for ceremony, but for memory. For the girl I'd once been, curled under hospital blankets with gauze on her arms and silence in her throat, and for the girl somewhere out there, still waiting for permission to speak. I told my truth, but someone else is about to find theirs. The crowd at the Civic Center was bigger than I expected. Rows of folding chairs stretched farther back than I'd imagined, filled with students, survivors, nurses, teachers, veterans. Some held programs, others clutched dog-eared copies of my book. The lights above the stage felt warmer than they should have, but I stood centered, shoulders squared, heels grounded. The MC said a few opening words, then she introduced me as author, advocate, survivor. I stepped forward, one hand on the podium, the other holding my marked copy of The Scar You Gave Me. I scanned the room and saw her, Celine, sitting in the very last row. No makeup, no statement necklace, just quiet. Vera didn't come. A reporter sitting near the press box whispered something into his recorder, probably noting her absence. I took a breath and began. They used to say the burn on my face made me hard to look at, I said. I say it makes it harder to look away from the truth. Silence. Not the awkward kind, the reverent kind. I opened the book to the final chapter, the one I hadn't shared anywhere yet. The day I was told I couldn't adopt, I read aloud. I was also told I didn't look like a mother, that my scars might scare children. What they didn't know is I've spent years mothering girls like me, through mentorship, through letters, through stories. They said I didn't look like a mother. I say I look like a survivor, and that's what these girls need to see. The applause began slow, then rose to its feet. It filled every corner of the room and stayed long enough to become something else. Recognition, yes, but also release. After the signing line dwindled, Celine approached. She didn't say hello. She didn't hug me. I guess you didn't need us to win, she said. I met her eyes. No, I replied, but I needed you to lose your grip on the version of me you kept rewriting. She blinked, then nodded once. No tears, no rebuttal, just acknowledgement. The next morning, I woke to headlines. Vera Kraft steps down from board of Family Foundation. And just beneath it, former housekeeper speaks out. I was in the room when they hid the truth. I didn't click the article. I didn't need to. Instead, I sat at my desk and opened a different email, one from the foundation I'd set up using my book royalties. The subject line read, First Sacred Scar Award recipient confirmed. Her name was Esperanza. 14, from Arizona, lost her arm in a fire, writes poetry about flowers that survive ash. I read her bio 3 times, smiling softly. That afternoon, I closed my laptop, poured myself a cup of coffee, and watched the wind play with the curtains. A peace I hadn't felt in decades settled over me. Not loud, not grand, but certain. They tried to end me with silence, but I ended it with a sentence.